Welcome to Racquets Biz, the only podcast that delivers data-driven insights into today's rackets industry. New clubs are opening consistently in the United States and all over the world. Some make it, some go out of business quickly. As an investor and facility operator, what is it that you need to know to create constant cash flow and consistent long-term ROI? Join me for today's episode. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Dominique Lemperle. Today's guest is Mark McMahon. Mark is the founder and president of McMahon Careers. Recognized and awarded by his industry peers, Mark is acclaimed as an astute and insightful search consultant, education provider, and career coach. Mark combines the disciplines and dedication of being a former world-class competitor with over 30 years of private club excellence and relevant experience to every search and professional engagement. Welcome, Mark, to the pod.
Hey, Dominique. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I'm glad you could make it. We're very lucky to have you today. Thank you for taking the time. So to introduce you to our audience who may not know you from the courts, tell me where you grew up, what racket sport you played, and what motivated you to become president of your own company.
Well, there's a lot in that question, Dominique, but I think that your listeners today are hearing a couple of different accents, yours and mine, and they're at least this point interested in mine. So I grew up in Melbourne, Australia. I had aspirations to be a professional tennis player. In today's vernacular, and maybe for your audience, I was probably undercapitalized at the time, but had big dreams, and sometimes big dreams can take you a long way as well. The world stage from a playing perspective was not in my future, but being a teacher and coach of the game for others certainly was. And my first career step, if you will, into the world that I am in today, which is racket sports, was as a tennis professional or teacher, coach for some parts of the world. And I spent time predominantly in Southeast Florida. My first director of tennis in those days job was in Boca Raton, Florida. And for the next 23 years, I worked at only 3 clubs. So I was very fortunate to be around at a time when at least tennis in those particular times was a very popular sport and gave me a lot of opportunities to build my craft as a teacher. Teacher or coach, if you will, that has always been of interest to me. The education side always of interest, not just trying to help other people be better, but to become better myself. And with that thought in mind, I got very involved in the industry from a development and professional growth or professional development perspective. I volunteered for my trade association. I wrote articles, and in those days you literally wrote them, maybe put them through a printer and sent them off to somebody via a mail, the old snail mail, if you will. But I made a conscious effort to share and to help others try and be better, which in turn certainly challenged myself personally to become better. And I mentioned a 23-year career plus or minus in the mid 2000s, 2003, 2004. The itch became pretty strong to consider what else may be in my future, but wanting to keep a foot in racket sports. And on reflection, I can go back and identify 1 or 2 people, one in particular, who was responsible for me being recruited to the USTA. That was in 2004, and I think I began working with them in 2005. And the charge was to launch a new consulting practice for the USTA. At the time, it was called the Tennis Service Representatives, TSRs. their job was to go out to the marketplace, to clubs and parks and schools, and connect the resources to grow the game of tennis with those facilities, and provide guidance, if you will, to advance the game of tennis. So during that next 12 months upon hiring, we in ourselves hired 62 people who were employees of the sections, and they became consultants around the country to help grow the game of tennis. That was a 3-year project, and at the end of 2008, when my role was eliminated, it was like, well, what am I going to do now? And that was the genesis for what is now McMahon Careers, a search, education, and career coaching firm that is designed, and its sole purpose is to help employers and to help professionals become better and identify ways to be more successful and meet the needs of their market. So maybe a little long-winded, but you asked me to cover 40 plus years there.
Yes, well said. And the industry is very lucky to have you, Mark. You help rackets professionals not only become successful directors, you also help connect them with the right clubs that are going to be the right fit for them. Now, looking back in your career, tennis was the predominant sport. Tennis was the main pro sport, but also the main country club sport in the rackets industry. Now we see new facilities. I'm talking about private facilities, corporate facilities opening almost daily all over the United States. These facilities have pickleball, paddle, and wellness. Each facility is a mix of either pickleball and paddle, or paddle and wellness, or just paddle by itself, or just pickleball by itself. But it's booming right now. That industry is hot, and paddle is considered the in sport right now. Now, with your 40 years of experience in the industry, what are your thoughts about that? Is it a fad like potentially racquetball and squash, or is paddle the real deal? What do you think?
Well, sometimes I know that from a client perspective, we've had conversations both with employers and with professionals, certainly who've asked that same question. And I think that the first foundational response to that is the 40 years of experience that I have isn't going to be very useful if I don't become very aware and intimately understand what's happening today. It certainly provides perspective, but we are in a different industry. And I would offer to you that we're in a different world, certainly from a social and socioeconomic perspective today, where people are making choices in how they spend their non-work time. I think when Starbucks first evolved, it was a question of, you've got your workplace, your home place, and your third place, and Starbucks aspired to be the third place. It's a great question whether or not they've achieved that, or maybe they have over the time, and maybe they are not doing it all the time. Who knows? But the point that I'd like to make is that I think we're in a competition with leisure activities in general. And I don't think necessarily that a Padel player +1 is a -1 on the tennis side, or vis-a-vis. I think that we have an opportunity today more than ever to attract people who are not just athletically or rackets inclined, but socially inclined to a sport, to an array of sports that provide an incredible opportunity for recreation and community, fun and interaction. As human beings, we need to commune, we need to interact, and nothing does that better than racket sports. So I think, what does Padel offer? It offers it reminds me of the arenas back in the days, whether it was the gladiators fighting, or the football teams playing or whatever it may be. You've got this area that people can get around and socialize and watch and participate without necessarily being on the court. And pickleball can do that to an extent as well. I know one client of mine in particular who is got some plans, ultimately to create a social, dining area, if you will, food and beverage area with pickleball scattered around the outside with Padel on another level. So
That's great.
it's not necessarily, isolating Padel there and pickle there. Certainly the commercial environments are considering, square footage and return on square foot and so forth. So proximity becomes important, right? And the floor plans become important. But I think an underlying premise for any investor or club owner or business-minded person that's looking at our industry is to consider what it is they're selling. And it's not the sport in isolation, in my opinion. It's the community and the interaction that you're able to create using one or more of those racket sports as the vehicle. So that
Yes.
would be my thought around this perspective. Is that's very different when I grew up and came through my early years as a teaching professional and a director and a club manager. We were delivering almost isolated sports in different channels, if you will. There was the golf and there was the tennis and there was the aquatics and there was the fitness. And those lines are blending today, and no more so
Hmm.
anywhere than racket sports.
That's a good point you're making, and I'm glad you brought up golf because that's going to be my next question. Some pundits are saying paddle, compared to pickleball, is very hard to master or very hard, not so hard to learn, but with the walls, hitting the ball off the walls and running back for the lobs and then sprinting up for the next potential drop shot. The court is bigger. It's not going to take off like pickleball. However, if you look at golf, I've played golf and I have not made much progress. It's incredibly difficult, I find, and there's so many nuances to golf as there are to paddle. Now, if you compare paddle to golf, golf is huge, generates billions off the course and on the course, has amateurs and pros obsessed with it, and it's incredibly difficult, especially in America. It's extremely popular. What do you think? Is Padel going to be the next golf?
The next goal from a barrier to entry, like a difficulty to play the sport. Is that the thought?
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
A
Hmm.
similar trajectory, trajectory as
Hmm.
golf. What do you
Hmm.
think?
I think from an investor perspective, if we kind of circle back to maybe the investor audience, certainly you talk about barriers to entry. You certainly don't need as much land to offer Padel as a business opportunity, sport and social. You certainly can do it in smaller footprints with multiple floors potentially in a building, as an example. So I think it has its own place, and maybe it's not necessarily something that I think maybe has a ceiling because of its difficulty of level, difficulty to play. I think actually it has every opportunity to be very fulfilling for players who are coming in and taking up the sport.
So it sounds like community building is crucial. Doesn't matter what sport you have, pickleball, paddle, golf. The sport may be difficult or it might be hard to learn, but what's most important is that people have a community in which they feel I belong to that community. So the operator of the facility or the pro or the director, their main task is to create that strong community where people want to belong to. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, I think that is something that is ever present for a director or a professional. Is it's needed at all times. Someone said recently that the court sizes never change. It's what happens in and around and on the courts that really make the difference, and that's where the community comes into play.
Correct. It doesn't matter what kind of club you have. I learned that from personal experience. It might look like the Ritz-Carlton inside, but if it feels like a graveyard inside, it doesn't matter. If the atmosphere in there is toxic, it's not fun to go there, it doesn't matter what it looks like inside. So I think that's a very important lesson facility owners and investors might learn today or
Yeah,
anytime.
yeah, yeah. We, as you know, Dominique, we run several education programs, and we had one of the participants. We have a program that we actually have our participants offer some education to each other. And one of our participants was talking recently about an exercise that he had participated in, where they were asked to identify from their memory a good boss and a bad boss, and they looked at the technical expertise, the emotional expertise of the person, and what they remembered most. And it was about the emotional expertise. It was about the ability of that boss, good or bad, to connect with people, to motivate people, to engage people, and being able to um, set a budget and stay on your business plan. It's a critical discipline for any business, but it doesn't stop there. It
Right.
has to also engage the fact that what you're selling is the nuance of relationship and the value, as we've talked about, of community, where people have a sense that they want to be somewhere, they want to belong.
Right.
Yeah.
That's present in all the sports that we can, and we can take that going forward to any facility. So you just referenced the workshop that you led for your students. Were you referring to the CRSE program?
No, actually, it was a mastermind group that we run that someone had offered that observation about good and bad bosses. And the actual conversation was around the challenges of leadership. And sometimes it's hard to lead because the decisions you make may not always be popular. They hopefully are correct. They're the right decisions for the majority or for the business overall, but there's always going to be outliers to that, and that's what makes leadership so challenging. So that was the emphasis. But um, you mentioned the CRSE, the Certified Racket Sports Executive Program, and that's actually more of a focus on what I call the X's and O's, or the tackling and blocking, right? It's the fundamentals of running a small business, a small enterprise. And most rackets facilities, whether they are within a private club or standalone commercial facilities, they are small enterprises, and the principles of running a small business do not change. And I know you know this. One of my opening lines every year with our class is you could be operating an ice cream shop, and the things that we're going to talk about in the program would apply equally to a retail store or the ice cream shop than they would to a rackets facility. And those do not change. So I'll let that sit, but that is, maybe the difference between the processes and the procedures versus the interpersonal skills and the communication that's necessary.
That is very true. We do operate small businesses on different levels. At country clubs, it's member service and member satisfaction is most important. And in some cases, losing money is part of the business. The capital fees cover those losses. But for corporate clubs, it's very important that directors stay on budget and are very aware of how they're performing, how they're are they on budget, are they excelling, are they losing money, so they have to keep a constant eye on managing that budget. You have now worked with hundreds of CRSE graduates. CRSE meaning Certified Racquet Sports Executives. Is that right? Is that
Correct.
title
Yep.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 10-month program, and you lead them through several modules. Can you be a little bit more specific what models you offer in that program, and what skills is it exactly that most CRSE applicants need the most?
Well, I think the first, at least the first trait, if not skill, that each professional who wants to lead a program needs is a mindset of a belief that it's an important component of running a program, and that is how to run the business. You mentioned private clubs and commercial clubs, and both have parameters that are established around it. The difference in a private club is that it's the value proposition is built around the dues structure, and people belong to a club and see value in paying monthly dues. And a particular department certainly may operate at a loss on money in, money out for what is provided, but a part of that value proposition is being a part of that environment, being a part of that club. The commercial club has a different need and a different, certainly a different investment structure from the outset, and therefore a different operating principle. And there is an expectation of return. But it doesn't matter what the parameter is, the leader of the department has to meet those expectations. So to your question about the racket sports directors and those that lead programs, our modules interestingly cover what you might look at as a business person who was going to open a club. And I'll run through them very quickly, but we start with business planning. Who do you want to be? Do you want to be the Mercedes or the Audi of your environment, or are you okay being the Chevrolet or the Honda of your environment? To what degree do you want to deliver? Where do you want to impact the market? Both are necessary, right? I mean, you need both types of cars. You need all types of clubs, all degrees of service and levels of quality. But setting that business plan of who you want to be, how you're going to deliver against those plans. We start with a foundational business plan. We look at competition. We look at opportunity and threats that exist, as any investor would going into an area. We move from there onto operational budgets, because once we decide who we want to be and how we want to deliver, then we need to figure out, well, how are we going to finance that? How are we going to have cash flow? To what degree is it going to cost us to provide what we aspire to deliver? We move from operational budgets to human resources. You need people. You need to understand certainly the expectations for those people. How are you going to define the roles? What's your organizational chart going to look like? Who and how are you going to train those individuals and help them grow, help them be, attract talent and make them the best they can be. We move from that to a broader concept of from where you are today to where are you going. So we look at strategic planning and the long-term vision against these short-term business plans and budgets and people, etc. We include a module on capital budgeting. So yes, it's great to have a strategic plan, but how are you going to pay for it? Ultimately, how are you going to replace, have capital to replace your amenities and keep them up to standards so that you're not deferring maintenance all the time. We have a module on essentially front desk and retail. It's the information central for most clubs. It's the first person that someone sees when they come into your club is that front desk operation. And very often there's a profit center sitting there in the retail component. We go from there to a general session on leadership and the traits of leaders that are able to take businesses from point A to point D through points B and C. So we incorporate each of these components into a monthly module. What I leave out, communications, and we offer a module on personal and professional development because we want the individual themselves. If you're going to deliver the best that is necessary for other people, you need to be able to bring yourself the best that you can be as well. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to be focused only outwardly. You need to be able to look inwardly and say where and identify where and how you're going to get better as well. So that curriculum was put together in response to the market that was telling us in our search work, we want these skills of our leaders. Our director of rackets, our leadership in the rackets department need to be able to bring a broad-based executive thinking approach to running their business. It's not just about the quality of the on-court lessons or the clinics or leagues or tournaments. They're all important. But how is this individual going to interact amongst the leadership team of the club, interact with the board, interact certainly with the general manager? So that was the design of the program back in 2018 and 19. We launched in 2020. So we're proud of that. We were first to market with that type of program. And as you mentioned, next year we should graduate in 2026, our 250th executive. So we're proud of that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I proudly displayed the certificate on my desk, and it makes an impact. To me, it felt like I received the MBA of the rackets industry, Mark. And I couldn't have gotten that education anywhere else. Right now, there are other options available, but I'm very happy to have received that from you. And I'm always grateful for the people I met in the program as well. The network that I established in that network still lasts today. Still lasts. It's ongoing and growing.
Well, I think, Dominique, you speak to something or two things that are critically important. One is it's a commitment for everybody to look to say how can they get better. And choosing product A, B, or C is really not the point. The point is to identify what you want to accomplish and why, and then do the research, do your diligence, and understand what and how different types of education are going to be meaningful to you in the marketplace. What is going to be desirable within the industry, not just now and in the next 3 or 4 years, but beyond. And then number two, there's lots of different ways of learning. The value proposition that we've advanced is not just the experts or so-called experts that deliver the curriculum in a live classroom session and participate in small groups and so forth, but what I call the cross-pollination, the learning that happens when people get together and communicate with each other in conversation and in dialogue, and that's that builds not just perspective of how other people approach certain challenges and have achieved certain things, but it also promotes an opportunity for you to build a network that you can call on later. So education and participation, no matter what it is or where it is, or whom it's through, is really not, it's really just about being active and engaged and most importantly, being relevant to what you want to do and how you want to use it.
Yes. So the lesson learned here for first-time facility operators or investors is it's important to hire somebody who has the on-court experience, yes, how to teach lessons, but also that person, if that's the director of rackets or paddle, has to have that business background as well. Cannot just be teaching lessons 8 hours a day and neglect the business background.
I want to offer, if I can, just one other component there, which I think is critically important. And I know some of your audience will be in the commercial club sector, those that are thinking about, contemplating building or investing in freestanding commercial facilities. And, you go through your design and you go through your engineering and you go through your building plans and you pay every attention and detail to how your club is finished. And then you look potentially for somebody who can lead your club and actually provide the value that you are trying to provide through community and events and so forth, with a lesser degree of commitment of resources. And I think that very often the difference between serving a private club and a commercial club is, the question is, well, how can we get the best person, as opposed to how can we get a person for the least amount of money? And that's almost like my grandmother saying, penny wise and pound foolish,
Yeah.
right? Because you are arguably minimalizing or marginalizing the most important aspect of what you are going to claim to deliver, which is a quality experience for your members. So, we're in the search business, so our clients are employers, and I say exactly that. You don't have to pay over the odds, but you need to be mindful of what the market is and be responsive to that.
And it has to be a well-rounded person at this point in 2025 where we are. They have to be well-versed in all racket sports, in the business part of the industry as well as the teaching and member service. So being a well-rounded person in all those sectors is extremely important. Would you say it's more important today than it was 20 years ago?
I think that the need today is a mindset need first and foremost. And I say that because the change has been just at incredible pace lately. And there are a lot of professionals who kind of sat they sat on their hands even when pickleball became popular and their members were asking for some access to a sport that they saw at a local YMCA or a public park, and their club didn't offer it, and they couldn't understand why. And the reality was that there wasn't someone that was leading that charge on their behalf. There wasn't someone that was being responsive to what a member was saying that they wanted to buy and pay for. Like, it's almost like saying that, I'm a juice supplier and someone wants orange, but we don't do orange. We just do lime and lemon, So, well, they're going to go find the orange somewhere else.
Right.
So that has changed. That some of it has been a generational change and some of it has been a mindset change. But I think today when you're hiring, you have to be looking for someone who doesn't just have the capabilities for what you need today, but has a mindset to be open to what you might need tomorrow. And
Right.
we can't possibly know what that is. We can only look back 5 years, and unless we looked across the Atlantic or maybe into South America, we didn't know that Padel existed.
Correct.
And all of a sudden it's quote the new thing. So it doesn't take a long view to go back and look at the changes that have taken place so quickly. So I think mindset is the most important thing.
Mindset. And when you go into these clubs and the general managers and search committees hire you to bring them the best 10 candidates, what, or even more than that, 40, 50 best candidates, and then they filter it down to the best one. What do you see? What are some general misconceptions general managers and search committees have about the racket industry right now, and how do you educate them and set them straight?
Well, to start with, if we bought them 50, we would probably get fired pretty quick. So our role is first to help an employer, a club, assess what they need and define that, and we help them through that. And I'd like to think we do it as good as it can be done. You know, we have quite a process of discovery, we call it, to help a client really define it. And most importantly, particularly with a search committee, to provide all the stakeholders a real opportunity to provide input to that. And as a result of that exercise on the front end, you create what I kind of frame a North Star, because that North Star is going to be important to keep in mind as you do winnow down that list of potential candidates. And we typically will put some number, and it is, you know, it depends on the job, the number of applicants that are qualified, but, you know, arguably it could be, you know, anywhere from 8 to 10 candidates, let's say a short list, if you want to call it that. And all of the various, you know, items that would support those candidates in front of a client, and then we would explore that with the client to have them ultimately identify who they might want to then spend time with in much deeper conversation and different circumstances. So, you know, your on-site interviews, if you will. And I think that the misconceptions, we try and take care of those at that very early stage. And the biggest misconception, I think, is how a club, or we'll just say a general manager, just for argument's sake, how a general manager expects a director to spend their time, and how a general manager expects the director to generate their own personal compensation. And tennis and golf have a commonality that can be confusing, unlike, let's say, the director of food and beverage, or the controller, or the director of grounds, where there is some compensation for running the department, we'll call that a base salary, and then some compensation that is derived from services that are delivered, right? Like instruction, lessons, programs, clinics, we'll call that variable compensation. So you've got this base and variable, and very often there's a misunderstanding as to what the amounts are. A general manager understands the base clearly because it sits on the P&L. It's a part of the budget. The variable, there's very often a flow through of that. It comes into the department and goes out, and there's some maybe cost that's involved, certainly cost to have that go through the club's payroll system. So there's some amount that is retained, but then that is paid out, and there's very often a lack of clarity around that. And sometimes a general manager will say that a job is worth X amount of money, and we'll just ask a question. Well, let's walk through how that is going to be generated. And if the base is X and the variable is Y, and we come up with Z, Z can be very different. You know, the manager might think it's $300,000, and in reality, it's $100,000. So there's a huge gap there. And it happens less and less now, but it's still a confusing point, because very often the thought will be, well, the professional can make their money teaching. Mm. And then the question is, well, how much do you want them teaching? Mm-hmm. Well, not too much, because they've got to run the department, you know, maybe 5 hours, 10 hours a week, couple of hours a day. Well, where's the compensation going to come from? And that can be a really important moment, because it provides clarity around the expectations and around the resourcing of that role. And those jobs last longer. The tenure of those pros, we know stories where pros go in and, 12 months in, they're starting to scratch their head, and 2 years in, they're looking for a new job because
Right.
it's not providing them with the compensation that they expected. And I think clarity and transparency around that is critical. We started posting, compensation ranges a couple of years ago. We were the only company that was really doing that, the only firm that was doing that. And we got some pushback from some employers at first, and once it was talked about, the reality of it is that there is an understanding of that. If you're going to, if the market is one that you need to compete in, then compete in a transparent way, and we see great success with that. And conversely, I think it can be also good for the club in the long term because then they've got understanding, they've got clarity around what this role really means from a value proposition to its members.
Yes. Yes. Thanks for clarifying that. That happens frequently. And then pros, unfortunately, after a few jobs like this, might experience burnout and say, I've had enough. I work my butt
Hmm.
off and I just don't see the benefits of working in this industry. Then they might follow the trend that's currently happening of opening their own facility and either teaching there or becoming a part owner or uh, running it as a general manager. Now, and I ask every guest this question. If What advice do you have for first-time facility operators who open their own facility? Let's say they follow the trend and open a paddle and pickleball facility in a warehouse. What advice do you have for them so they don't go bankrupt after 1 year?
Well, bankruptcy is a big step. I think the realization that you don't have a viable business would be a horrible mindset to have to be faced. So I'd say that the number one thing would be to was it measure twice, cut once, and that is the meaning, of course, is to to really validate and revalidate your business plan, your set of expectations, your set of assumptions. Um, if anyone's ever renovated a house, you get your quotes and you add 50% because if you don't, you're going to get a pretty rough surprise during your renovation project. And I think that um, the expectation sometimes can be very different than the realization of, or the reality, if you will, of what it takes to change behavior. And that is maybe you go into an area that is devoid of a facility. There's a great need for it. All of your metrics say, from average incomes and the geography around the club and the use cases in other communities of similar types and so forth. All of the metrics are great, right? They say this is a great place to build Club X, and maybe it is. And assuming that there's attention paid to what we've already talked about, which is not just the finish of the amenities, but the quality of the people. Assuming you have all that in place, once you're up and open and your metrics prove true and the doors are open and everything's going great, that's when the work starts because now you're talking about retention. Now you're talking about the nuances or the nuance of being a club operator and meeting members' needs in an ongoing fashion. To my point earlier, where the member says, I want orange juice, and you have lemon and lime only, well, you go get orange. Well, now they're going to want grapefruit. And that's okay because they're the customer. Now, you may say, I'm not a grapefruit guy. I don't serve that at my club. That's okay. but you may not be able to retain that member who wants the grapefruit juice. So the hard part is the flexibility and the adaptability. And sometimes you've got to be Steve Jobs. Sometimes you've got to say, I'm going to do this, even though you don't know you need this yet. You're right.
Right.
You've got to evolve. And, maybe, I'll just pick an example. You have a multi-purpose facility. Maybe on Sundays at 5 p.m., you're using that facility for something else that you hadn't envisioned when you opened the doors. Don't be such a purist that you are not looking potentially at the realities of, again, what your market might be telling you. So I don't know that there is a cookie cutter answer to the question, except, again, just like the leader of the department, you've got to be flexible and adaptable. I think the owner needs to be mindful that the starting point is just that. It is the starting point. And I would say the same thing to a professional who is listening or watching, is when you go into a job, that's what it is today. If circumstances, member expectations, the competitive environment, if those things change, the economy, if those things change, the likelihood is that your job will change as well.
Yes.
And that's sort of the modern reality of our world, I think.
So to sum it up, you're saying be prepared with a solid business plan and be flexible, be ready for change. Would you,
Yeah.
yes, okay.
Yeah.
Would you help if there's some professionals out here who feel motivated to start their own facility, to become first-time facility operators or go into business? Is this something you would help them with? Establish a business plan and guide them along the way?
Well, I would tell them to identify someone who is really good at doing that. I think that my degree of expertise would be defining what those needs are going to be. Building business plans is not what I do. That's not who I am today. And it's not something I think that I'm the best at. I think there are other people that are very good at doing that. But I think that my value, Dominique, is the conversation with someone around why they're going where they're going, or why they think they want to go in that direction. I think my expertise has evolved to a place that sits prior to that decision making time, where a professional or any individual might be thinking about it. And I'm not necessarily the supporting metrics person, but I could certainly point out the metrics to look for.
Sure.
But before that even is, what are the life and professional reasons that this is sounding like the right thing for you? I think that would be the conversation that I would have with someone.
Yes. And how can they reach out to you, Mark, to get that advice?
McMahoncareers.com.
Okay.
McMahoncareers.com. Yeah, that's easy, and yeah, they can certainly find me at that point.
Anything else that you think we should add to this conversation before we go today?
Well, besides tuning into your other episodes, I would say to your audience is to continue to explore in the way that you are exploring now. You're learning and you're growing by tuning into Dominique, tuning into Racquets Biz, and I think that that learning, that education, it doesn't need to be some university course, or a series of books, or you have to travel across the country for conferences and so forth. Those are all good things to do, but those things are not the only way that we can get better. I think the way we get better is looking inward first. What do I need? What makes sense for me? And then what opportunities are out there? And it's the playing field has never been more even in terms of accessing information and knowledge and understanding. And on top of that, then you stack all of those things with the people of this industry. We have an incredibly generous industry, meaning that the people in it are very generous with their time. So
Yes.
it's unlikely that you would maybe reach out to someone and say, look, I'd like to ask you a question, and you're going to get turned down. I don't see that happening too often.
I agree with you. And you're part of that industry, Mark, and we're very lucky to have you. I was very lucky that you said yes today to today's podcast. And thank you again for your time. I know you got clients waiting. And I, again, appreciate your time. And I can't wait to do this again, maybe in a year or so.
Thank you, Dominique. My pleasure.
See you soon. See you
Bye-bye.
next time on Racquets Biz. Don't miss the next episode and subscribe to Racquets Biz on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Like us on LinkedIn and Instagram. See you next week.